Welcome to our exploration of the top creepy places in Minnesota, where history intertwines with the unexplained. Minnesota, a land where the lakes stretch on forever, and the forests seem to whisper secrets only the wind understands. On the surface, it's a place of postcard beauty, peaceful, serene, and inviting. But beneath that calm exterior, shadows gather. Here, in the heart of the North, history is never truly silent. Every winding road, every abandoned building, every lonely riverside holds stories that refuse to be forgotten. Tonight, we set out on a journey into Minnesota's most haunted corners, a journey that will blur the line between legend and reality. We'll visit places where sorrow still clings to the air, where footsteps echo in empty hallways, and where the unexplained is simply part of the landscape. These are the stories that locals whisper about, the places that dare you to stay after dark, and the memories that refuse to rest. Before we enter the realm of the unknown, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss out as we uncover the mysteries of creepy places. Remember to like, share, and comment below with your own tales of the supernatural. Number 5. Nopeming Sanatorium. Hidden among the dense forest just outside Duluth, Minnesota, stands a shell of crumbling brick and shattered glass, the Nopeming Sanatorium. Its very name, derived from the Ojibwe word meaning "in the woods," hints at its isolation, but nothing can prepare you for the silence that hangs over its abandoned halls. Here, the past isn't just remembered. It breathes, it echoes, it lingers. Nopeming Sanatorium opened in 1912 at the height of America's tuberculosis epidemic. Back then, tuberculosis, known as the White Plague, was a death sentence, and the only hope was isolation. The sanatorium was built as a sanctuary, a last resort for those desperate for a cure in an era before antibiotics. Rows of beds lined sunlit porches, patients bundled in blankets, breathing in the cold northern air, clinging to the promise that fresh air and rest could save them. But hope was often fleeting. Over the decades, thousands passed through Nopeming's doors. Some recovered, but many more did not. At its peak, hundreds of deaths were recorded each year. The sorrow of so many lost lives soaked into the walls, into the very ground, especially in the children's ward, where laughter and play were slowly replaced by silence. As medicine advanced, the need for tuberculosis sanatoriums faded. By the 1970s, Nopeming's wards were nearly empty. The facility was repurposed as a nursing home, but even then, the sense of loss remained. Over time, as the building aged and the cost of maintenance increased, it became less practical to keep the facility open. Reports of deteriorating infrastructure, health and safety concerns, and a shrinking number of residents all contributed to the decision to close the site. By the early 2000s, the last residents and staff had left, and Nopeming Sanatorium was officially abandoned. The empty halls and decaying buildings remain, a haunting reminder of a time when hope and sorrow walked hand in hand, and a place where many believe the spirits of the past still linger. Today, Nopeming is a magnet for urban explorers, ghost hunters, and thrill seekers. But those who come looking for a scare often find more than they bargained for. Visitors describe hearing desperate coughing echoing through empty corridors, the faint ring of a nurse's bell, or the metallic clatter of medical trays. Some have seen shadowy figures moving past broken windows, or glimpsed pale faces peering from the darkness. In the children's ward, it's not uncommon to hear the ghostly sound of laughter, or sobbing, when the wind is still. One group of paranormal investigators tells of a night spent in the old isolation ward. As midnight approached, their equipment began to fail. Batteries drained in minutes, flashlights flickered, and their audio recorders picked up faint voices, some pleading, others simply repeating the word, "help." One investigator reported feeling a cold, unseen hand grip her arm, leaving behind a deep, aching chill that lasted for days. But perhaps the most infamous part of Nopeming is the so-called death tunnel. This long, narrow corridor was used to discreetly move the bodies of those who had succumbed to the disease, away from the eyes of other patients. Today, the tunnel is a place of heavy silence and overwhelming dread. Explorers have reported hearing the shuffling of unseen feet behind them, feeling sudden drops in temperature, and even seeing pale, indistinct figures standing at the far end, watching, waiting. Legends swirl around the sanatorium. Some say the spirits of patients linger, unable to move on because of the trauma they endured. Others believe the land itself is cursed, that the sorrow and suffering of so many souls have soaked into the soil. There are reports of glowing orbs floating through the halls, doors slamming shut without warning, and the overwhelming sense that you are never truly alone. One chilling account comes from a former nurse who returned to visit the ruins years after the facility closed. She described standing in the old surgical suite, feeling the temperature plummet, and hearing her name whispered in a voice she hadn't heard in decades. A patient she'd cared for as a young woman, gone long before the sanatorium's doors finally closed. Even locals who've never set foot inside speak of strange lights flickering in the windows at night, and the feeling of being watched when driving past the grounds. Some say that if you listen closely on a still night, you'll hear the faint strains of music, an old gramophone playing somewhere deep inside, a remnant of the sanatorium's brief moments of joy. Would you dare walk the crumbling halls of Nopeming after dark? Would you stand in the death tunnel and listen for the voices of the past? Or would you turn away, leaving the spirits of Nopeming to their restless sleep? Number 4. Palmer House Hotel. Our journey into Minnesota's haunted heart begins in the small, unassuming town of Sauk Center. Here on Main Street stands a building that has watched over the community for more than a century, a place where the past lingers in every shadow and the air hums with secrets. This is the Palmer House Hotel. Built in 1901, the Palmer House rose from the ashes of its predecessor, Sauk Center House, the city's first hotel, which had burned down just a year before. Some say that tragedy leaves a mark on a place, that sorrow and fear can seep into the very walls, refusing to be forgotten. For the Palmer House, those whispers seem to ring especially true. Step inside, and you're greeted by an elegant lobby with creaking wooden floors and ornate Victorian details. But beneath the charm, there's a chill, an undercurrent of something unseen. Staff and guests alike speak of sudden drops in temperature, even on the warmest summer nights. The lights flicker with no explanation, and sometimes in the hush of early morning, you'll hear footsteps echoing down empty hallways, as if children are running and playing through the corridors, even when there are no children present. It's in room 17 that the veil between worlds feels thinnest. Many who have stayed there report waking to the sensation of their bedsheets being gently tugged, or the distinct feeling of someone sitting at the edge of the bed, silent and unseen. Some have heard a woman's soft voice whispering in the darkness, her words impossible to understand, but heavy with longing. The most chilling accounts come from guests who've glimpsed a figure, a woman in white, her features blurred, gliding through the room before vanishing into the walls. Legend claims she was once a resident here, her story lost to time but her sorrow echoing through the years. The hotel's bar, a gathering place for locals and travelers alike, holds its own secrets. Bartenders have watched glasses slide across the counter on their own. Patrons have caught fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures reflected in the old mirrors, only to turn and find the room empty. Sometimes laughter drifts from the empty parlor, mingling with the strains of a piano that hasn't played in decades. Down in the basement, the air grows colder still. Employees dread closing alone, describing the sense of being watched from the shadows, or worse, followed by footsteps that never quite catch up. Paranormal investigators have flocked to the Palmer House, capturing unexplained voices on tape and photographing strange orbs of light that dart between the rooms. Some report being overcome by a wave of sadness so intense it's almost suffocating, as if the walls themselves are mourning. But the Palmer House isn't just a place of fear. It's a crossroads, a meeting point between the living and the lost, where stories are told and retold, and where belief is tested with every unexplained encounter. Is it the memory of fire, the weight of forgotten tragedy, or something far older that haunts these halls? Or is it simply the power of our own imagination, fueled by the creaks and sighs of an ancient building? Would you spend the night here, knowing what lingers in the darkness? Or would you heed the warnings of those who claim that some guests never truly check out? Number 3. The Wabasha Street Caves. Beneath the bustling streets of St. Paul, Minnesota, lies a world carved from sandstone, a world where shadows linger, and history is written in secrets. The Wabasha Street Caves are more than just a curiosity. They're a crossroads of legend, crime, and the unexplained. The story of the Wabasha Street Caves begins in the mid-1800s, when enterprising settlers discovered that the soft sandstone beneath St. Paul was perfect for excavation. At first, these caves served a simple purpose: storage for potatoes and vegetables, kept cool by the earth itself. But as the city grew, so did the cave's reputation. They became a refuge for the outcast and the ambitious, a place where the rules of the surface world didn't always apply. By the early 20th century, the caves had transformed. Bootleggers and gangsters found sanctuary here, drawn by the promise of secrecy and the thrill of the forbidden. The walls absorbed not just the damp, but the dreams and fears of everyone who passed through. The Roaring Twenties brought the caves to life in ways no one could have imagined. Prohibition turned St. Paul into a haven for outlaws, and the Wabasha Street Caves became one of the city's most notorious speakeasies. Known then as the Castle Royal, here, beneath the city lights, gangsters like John Dillinger and Ma Barker were rumored to mingle with politicians, musicians, and thrill-seekers. Jazz music filled the air, glasses clinked, and deals were struck in the shadows. But where there's vice, violence is never far behind. One night, the legend goes, 3 men sat playing cards in a back room. A sudden burst of gunfire shattered the revelry. When the smoke cleared, the men were gone, never to be seen again. Some say their bodies were buried in the tunnels, their restless spirits doomed to wander forever, searching for justice or revenge. Even today, staff and visitors report strange occurrences: the sound of footsteps echoing down empty corridors, flickering lights, and the unmistakable chill of being watched. Are these just echoes of a violent past, or is something still lurking in the darkness, waiting to be found? The Wabasha Street Caves are more than a relic. They're alive with stories. Guides tell of unexplained cold spots and sudden gusts of wind where none should exist. Some report seeing ghostly figures dressed in 1920s attire, vanishing around corners or staring silently from the shadows. One of the most chilling encounters comes from a former bartender who claimed to see a man in a pinstripe suit appear at the end of the bar, only to fade away as she approached. Others have heard the faint strains of jazz music drifting through the tunnels, long after the last band packed up and left. And then there's the legend of the Lady in White, a spectral woman said to glide through the caves, searching for a lost love who never returned from one of the gangsters' deadly games. What is it about these caves that refuses to let the past die? Is it the violence, the secrecy, or something deeper? Something that feeds on memory and fear. Today, the Wabasha Street Caves are open to the public, their secrets revealed, at least the ones we know about. Tour guides share tales of gangsters and ghosts, laughter and loss, inviting visitors to step into history's shadow and decide for themselves what's real. But even in the light, the darkness lingers. The stories endure, passed from one generation to the next, growing with every retelling. Are the ghosts of the Wabasha Street Caves real? Or are they the echoes of a city that refuses to forget its wildest days? Beneath St. Paul's busy streets, the Wabasha Street Caves remain. A reminder that history is never truly buried, and that some secrets are meant to be explored. Number 2. The Soap Factory. In the heart of Minneapolis, where the city's old mills and warehouses cast long shadows over the Mississippi, stands a place where history clings to the walls and the air is thick with secrets. This is the Soap Factory, a building whose past is as dark and layered as the shadows that fill its cavernous halls. The story begins in the late 1800s, when Minneapolis was a city of industry, ambition, and relentless growth. The building that would become the Soap Factory was originally a warehouse, but by the turn of the century, it took on a new and much grimmer purpose: home to the National Purity Soap Company. Back then, making soap was a grisly business. Forget the sweet-smelling bars we know today. Soap was made from animal byproducts, harvested from slaughterhouses that lined the river. Every day, tons of animal carcasses, bones, and fat were hauled into the factory. Workers rendered the remains in massive vats, boiling them down in a process that filled the building with a stench so overwhelming it was said to cling to your skin for days. The work was brutal, the pay was meager, and the risks were real. Machinery malfunctioned. Caustic chemicals burned flesh and lungs. The animal remains attracted rats and flies. and sometimes the line between life and death felt dangerously thin. It wasn't just the workers who suffered. The sheer volume of animal death left a mark on the building, one that some say is still felt today. There are stories of blood soaking into the foundation, of animal cries echoing through the walls, and of a darkness that settled over the factory and never quite lifted. As the decades rolled on, the soap business faded. The building changed hands and purposes, but the sense of unease remained. By the 1990s, the space was reborn as an art center, a haven for Minneapolis's creative community. The raw industrial spaces were transformed into studios, galleries, and the legendary soap factory art venue. But as soon as the artists moved in, the stories began again. Lights flickering for no reason, doors slamming in empty rooms, tools and artwork vanishing, only to reappear in odd places. Some artists reported hearing the echo of animal cries late at night, or catching the overwhelming scent of rot, blood, and sulfur. Suddenly, inexplicably, as if the past was clawing its way back into the present. The basement, where much of the animal rendering took place, and quickly gained a reputation as the most active and oppressive part of the building. Shadowy figures have been glimpsed moving through the lower levels, some human, some not. Staff and visitors speak of the soap factory demon or shadow man, a tall, dark figure seen pacing the basement and old boiler rooms. He's been spotted standing silently in doorways, or reflected in dusty mirrors. Those who've locked eyes with the demon describe an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the building itself is warning them to leave. Others have seen smaller, skittering shapes, or heard the soft padding of paws across the concrete. Phantom animals, perhaps, trapped by the violence of their final moments. One artist, working late into the night, described glancing up from her canvas to see a pair of glowing eyes staring at her from the shadows, gone in a blink, but leaving behind a chill that lingered for hours. During the soap factory's infamous haunted house events, even seasoned actors and crew members have been shaken by what they've experienced. Props move on their own. Disembodied voices whisper from the darkness. Cold spots linger in the air long after everyone has left. Some guests have fled in terror, not from the stage scares, but from something far older and more real. There are also persistent reports of a woman's laughter echoing through the upper floors, or the sound of footsteps pacing above when the building is locked and empty. Paranormal investigators have captured mysterious EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, unexplained lights, and the feeling that the building itself is alive, watching, waiting, remembering. Some believe the restless spirits here aren't just those of former workers, but of countless animals whose lives ended within these walls. The building's bloody history is a reminder that not all ghosts are human, and not all hauntings begin with a tragic accident or a lost soul. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a group of artists who decided to hold a seance in the old basement. As they sat in a circle, candles flickering, the temperature dropped suddenly. One by one, they reported feeling a weight pressing down on their chests, a suffocating, animalistic fear. The session ended abruptly when one artist screamed, claiming to see a mass of writhing, shadowy forms crawling across the floor toward her. When the lights came on, nothing was there. But the sense of unease never left. Even longtime staff members admit there are parts of the building they refuse to enter alone. The boiler room, in particular, is said to be a hotspot for paranormal activity. Tools disappear, radios switch stations on their own, and the sensation of being watched is constant. Some believe the spirits here are angry, trapped by the violence of their deaths, both human and animal alike. Today the soap factory is closed, but was it truly haunted? Or is it simply a place where the past refuses to be forgotten? In a city built on industry, ambition, and reinvention, perhaps some stories are too powerful to let go. You've heard the ghost stories, you've seen the horror movies, but these places, they're real. From ghost-infested hotels to roads no GPS wants to follow, carefully researched, creepy as hell. And yes, you can actually visit them. If you're that kind of curious, this is your guide. The top 25 most creepy US destinations pulls back the curtain on the darkest corners of America. Order your copy today. Number 1. Greycloud Island. There's a stretch of land just outside St. Paul, Minnesota, where time seems to slow, and the air grows heavier the moment you arrive. A place where the silence doesn't soothe, it lingers. This is Greycloud Island, a quiet patch of rural land caught between the slow bends of the Mississippi River and the modern sprawl of Washington County. At just under 8 square miles, the island appears almost untouched by time. Winding gravel roads, heavy woods, quiet homes spaced far apart. There's no town center, no tourist shops, and most of the people who live here prefer it that way. But beneath the peaceful surface, Greycloud Island carries a darker reputation, one that stretches deep into the land's forgotten history. Before settlers ever stepped foot here, this was sacred ground. The Dakota people inhabited this region for centuries. To them, this land wasn't just wilderness. It was spiritually significant. Burial mounds, ceremonial sites, and ancient pathways once marked the island. In fact, the island's very name is believed to come from Greycloud Woman, a prominent Dakota woman born in the early 1800s. Her life and lineage are deeply tied to the land. She was the daughter of a Dakota chief and a Scottish fur trader, and she played a unique role in the early cultural intersections between native communities and European settlers. But as colonists moved in, the old ways were pushed aside. Mounds were disturbed, graves were unmarked, sacred places were torn open in the name of agriculture, construction, and progress. And that is where many believe the haunting began. There are countless stories of shadowy figures moving among the trees, of a woman in white drifting along the roadside, her face forever hidden. Some say she's the spirit of Greycloud Woman herself, mourning the loss of her people and her land. Others believe she's a restless soul, trapped between worlds by the disturbance of her grave. But perhaps the most unnerving encounters happen near the old burial mounds. People describe sudden chills on warm nights, the sensation of being watched, and even the feeling of invisible hands brushing past them. Set back from the winding road, the cemetery is older than it looks. The earliest graves date to the mid-1800s, but the land itself was sacred long before that, used by native peoples as a burial ground for generations. Some say the island's very soil is layered with memory, grief, and secrets that refuse to stay buried. The cemetery is small, bordered by wild grass and ancient trees. Weathered headstones lean at odd angles, names and dates worn away by time and wind. It's beautiful in a lonely, unsettling way, a place where silence settles heavy, and every footstep seems to echo. Visitors often describe a sudden, inexplicable chill as they cross the gate, as if stepping into another world. Perhaps the most enduring legend is that of the 12 nuns. Locals say there's a row of 12 headstones, each marking the grave of a nun who lived and died on the island. The challenge is simple. Walk along the row and count each stone. You'll reach 12, every time. But turn around, retrace your steps, and try to count again. And you'll find the number has changed. Some say it's 11, others 13, but never 12 again. It's a trick of the mind, perhaps, or a subtle message from the other side. One mother brought her son to the cemetery, drawn by the legend. As she watched him count the stones, her blood ran cold. A ghostly boy, pale and silent, followed just behind her son, step for step. Panic seized her, and they fled the cemetery. The memory of that spectral child burned into her mind. But the 12 nuns are just the beginning. The air in the cemetery is thick with voices, soft whispers that seem to come from nowhere, or the anguished screams of a woman echoing through the trees. Some visitors report hearing disembodied voices calling their names, or the unmistakable sound of weeping on the wind. Paranormal investigators have spent long nights here, their equipment malfunctioning, batteries draining, cameras refusing to focus, and audio recorders picking up chilling, unintelligible whispers. And then there's the man in the red flannel jacket and orange hat, a cigarette always in hand, a rifle slung over his shoulder. At first, he seems like a remnant of the island's rural past. But then you notice, he's translucent, a figure half in this world and half in another. One woman who saw him said he stared at her with such intensity she had to leave immediately. But the terror didn't end there. As she drove away, she saw him again, this time in her rearview mirror, sitting in the back seat, silent and unblinking. Not everyone sees the man in red, but many leave the cemetery with stories of their own. One group of friends, hoping for a glimpse, found only silence, until as they left the island, they heard a young girl's voice whisper from the roadside, "Don't come back." The road was empty, the voice clear as day. Some say these hauntings are the restless spirits of those whose graves were disturbed, or echoes of sorrow from the Dakota people who once called this land home. Others believe the island itself is a kind of threshold, a place where the veil between worlds is thin, and the dead are never far from the living. Even outside the cemetery, Greycloud Island is a place of strange happenings. Drivers report phantom headlights of a white pickup truck that appear behind them, growing closer and closer as if to scare them off the road, only to vanish at the next bend. There are stories of sudden temperature drops, of electronics failing without reason, and of footsteps echoing on gravel when no one else is near. With every visit, the legends of Greycloud Island grow. The stories are passed from one generation to the next, warnings perhaps, or invitations to those who crave the unknown. Would you dare to walk the cemetery at midnight? Would you count the stones and risk what might be counting you? Or do you believe, like so many before you, that some stories are best left undisturbed? If you've ever heard the whispers, seen the shadows, or have your own story from Greycloud Island, share it in the comments below. Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes, wild beauty and quiet strength, where icy winters forge resilience, and ancient forests whisper secrets to those who listen. But beneath the surface, this state holds more than natural wonders. Shadows cling to forgotten trails, and old legends echo across the lakes, daring us to question what's real and what's waiting in the dark. Here, the past isn't just remembered, it lingers. Some say if you wander far enough, you might catch a glimpse of something unexplainable, or hear a voice that doesn't belong to the living. This has been Tyler. Thanks for joining me on another chilling journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed this glimpse into Minnesota's mysteries, share it with a friend, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us your own strange encounters below. Until next time, stay curious and stay creepy. Bye for now.